This is what it is, okay? I said empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Welcome to the third episode of the Deployment Dojo. This is a live show where we introduce software installation techniques using the WiX Toolset. I'm your host, Rob Mensching, and joining me today again is my friend and student of deployment, David Eidson. David, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Hey there.
All right. Well, we're good to have all of you with us. We've got a different kind of thing. Now, David, I know we've been working on trying to stabilize what we're doing here. And the first day it was kind of getting the tools and getting WiX in here. And then the next day I kind of made setting up the tools, our first kata, and then writing a little bit of WiX code and those kinds of things. But we still need to do a little bit more work around here. I need to bring another tool in to help us do this, because as I've started getting used of going through the katas back and forth, we're missing something I think would make our life a lot better. So are you willing for us to go back a little bit? We're not going to bring any katas with us today, but we're going to do some configuration and stuff like that. Sound all right?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So here's what we're going to do. And hey, we have a Martin here. Martin's great to have you. I think Martin's made every single show, which is fantastic. I love it. Let's go do something that's not WiX specific, but WiX adjacent is probably the thing that we're talking about. Let's go jump into that. All right. Where do we start? Well, we're going to start the command line again. Although I'm going to bring up a browser here real quick. And what we're going to bring in, David, is something that your and my little girls both might appreciate. We're going to bring a sandbox into the dojo, but not
Nice.
that kind of sand. It's a sandbox to help make our testing a little bit easier, a little bit faster, and honestly, a whole lot cleaner. So think white, pure sand that goes through the like the hourglasses that you see, you know, that. I think it's something like that. All right. Nice, pure, clean sand. No, actually, what we're going to talk about today is this thing called the Windows Sandbox. I'm running Windows, so here we go. The Windows Sandbox is it's a lightweight virtual machine, essentially, on your machine. It's built into Windows 10, modern Windows 10, and Windows 11. I happen to be running Windows 11. And what happens is that you configure it, you spin it up, and then as soon as you close the sandbox, it erases everything. And then you start it up again, and it's clean, just like you started off. Does that sound like it might be a useful tool for us?
Yeah, actually, absolutely. Does it work on most versions of Windows 10? Is it all versions?
Windows 10 Pro and up, so not Home, and which is, I think a lot of people, I actually don't know how many people have Home anymore. And they'll tell you what version number you need.
Okay.
But if you've been keeping up with Windows updates, I think everybody has that version of Windows 10 that has it. All right. So to use the sandbox, you have to turn it on your machine. I've already done that step. I'm not going to go through that because the Windows Sandbox documentation is very helpful in describing the steps that you do there. The thing that I want to go through is how we can configure the sandbox for our usage, and how we will then use it probably for all of our katas. And I figured what we would do is configure this box using our episode 2 work that we did, because I still have the episode 2 MSIs built, and kind of get our way through this. All right?
All right.
So I'm going to bring up Visual Studio Code because, well, that's what we always start. I'm in episode 3, the folder. There is nothing here, empty folder. And we're going to kind of do this like we do all our katas. We're going to step through step by step. Number 1, we create a file. And I want to create a file, not just an empty editor. All right. I'm going to call it dojo.wsb. Oh, yeah. Zach said that it requires the hypervisor, which is true. It does require your machine has to be able to run virtual machines. So you'd have to have a hardware bit in it. Most modern chips today, I think, have those kind of bits. You may have to turn them on. I actually think my machine had the bit turned off and I had to go into my BIOS and turn it on. Again, there's lots of steps on how to go through and configure all that. We are going to create a configuration XML file for this. No, thank you for your help. And as the documentation said, they came up with a very unique name for the root element of the configuration for the Windows Sandbox file, WSB, Windows Sandbox. You call it a configuration. Okay? Now, in the Sandbox, it's a completely separate machine, and we have my machine, and then we're going to have the Sandbox running, and we need to have some way to connect those two pieces together so that they can communicate. By default, they'll give us the clipboard, so we can actually copy in and out of the Sandbox. That's very helpful. But in our case, we want to move a bunch of files back and forth, particularly all the things that we're building, and then we want to test install. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
All right, so we want to map some folders. Now the documentation walks us through this, but I want to get us this far along. So then you can have many of them. I'm going to start with one map folder in this collection of mapped folders. By the way, I'm just going to stop here real quick. I really dislike this style of XML where they force you to wrap all of your elements with a plural version of that element. I'm like, why? I could just have map folders anywhere inside this configuration. This forces me to group them in one single element. You notice the WiX Toolset doesn't use this design at all. All right, so in the map folder, we have the host and we have the Sandbox. So I want to use the host folder. Thank you. And the Sandbox folder. Thank you. All right. So in here, I want to tell it where my host folder is. And in my case, I want to use the files that we had left over from episode 2. So that would be in Deployment Dojo episode 2. I want to have access to these files. Cool? Cool?
Cool.
All right. So I'm going to take this folder, put it here. I want to say, please take this host folder and put it inside the Sandbox. Now the Sandbox doesn't expose any of my drives or anything by default, but it does give me a C drive that has the Sandbox windows in it. And I'm going to say, you know what, just put it in the C:\Dojo folder. So what does this do? It takes my episode 2 folder and puts it in the Dojo folder. Pretty simple.
Simple.
Okay, simple. All right, now what do? We have one file in my episode 3. We have dojo.wsp. You just launch it. You can double click on it. Here, I'm just going to launch it from the command prompt. Over on my main window, it will pop up a window that I'll drag over here. And poof, it has done the work of configuring a Sandbox. This is the default Windows 11 background, and it gives you a little bit of Windows stuff. Notice it doesn't have any of my other Windows stuff. None of my broadcasting software, none of my shortcuts for Visual Studio and VS Code and all my command prompts. It's just a clean environment. And there's very little software in it by default as well. You can see not a lot of stuff in here, all right? But it does have a file explorer, which is good. And when we open up File Explorer and we look on this PC, where's my drives, please? The local disk is right here. So we can open the local disk, and there is the Dojo folder that we told it to add. And here is the Dojo folder with episode 2 in it. Cool?
Cool.
All right. So now let's do programs and features. This is a trick that you can get to the programs features, add and remove programs, appwiz.cpl. That is the application wizard control panel applet. This is my Fastway 2 there. And you can see the only software it shows installed is Edge. I think it's interesting that Edge is registered here. What are we going to do? We're going to double click episode 2. It runs. Nothing happens here because I hit refresh, and there's episode 2 in our install. And if you remember, episode 2 also installed to C program files x86, I think. And there's episode 2 with the episode 2.txt file. All inside this sandbox, all a separate thing. And you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to close Sandbox. We're not going to uninstall the software. We're just closing Sandbox. All right?
Okay.
Boom. Sandbox closed. Okay, warning say, hey, by the way, you closed it. You're going to lose all your data. Like, yep, I know. I'm going to bring the Sandbox up again. 3, 2, 1. Boom. Window pops up over here. Let me grab it. That was fast. It blinks, finishes the configuration, and it is done. Let's go back in, open up the control panel, appwiz.cpl, also known as add remove programs, or programs and features. They've changed its name. Notice episode 2 is no longer installed. We'll open up our folder. We'll go to the C drive. Dojo is still here because we mapped it, but in our program files, notice episode 2 is missing. When we shut this thing down, it cleaned it all out.
Huh.
Sounds perfect for this type of things we're doing, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat.
And then of course I don't have networking enabled, so it can't see my home network at all. So we'll bring up the Dojo, we'll run the MSI. Episode 2 folders here, that text file is there, and when we refresh this, episode 2 is here. Okay, so Explorer has us open in this window. When I uninstall this MSI this time, just to show that it works, boom. We uninstall it, and Program Files folder noticed, Explorer noticed that episode 2 is removed out from underneath this, and boom, we're right back into the root folder. Spiffy.
Cool.
Yeah. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to be doing this a lot. Now, notice every time I bring this up, I have to keep like editing it and moving it around, and like I keep opening the same windows and things like that. Wouldn't it be nice if it would just pop up and give me all of those windows to start with? Because we always want to see probably programs and features, and we probably want it to open the Dojo folders by default. All right. It'd be nice to have all those things just done. Here I am closing windows. It doesn't even matter. Boom. Throw the Sandbox away. All right. So the cool thing is they do have a way of launching a logon command. Logon command. And then you give it a command, and I'm going to give it explorer.exe /dojo. Now this command is launched inside the sandbox, so we don't want to talk about the D drive, which is my local hard drive. We want to talk about the C drive, which is that virtual sandbox. All right, so this command is inside the sandbox. All right, let's go back, run it again. Bring my prompt up. Run the dojo.wsb again. It'll pop up a little window over here on my main monitor. I don't know why it always has to pop it here. I want it here, and we want it to run Explorer C:\dojo for us. Same as if we did, I don't know how to get here. Explorer.exe C:\dojo. Well, I guess there you go. It opened Explorer with that. All right. Okay. Cool. That only runs one command. How do we run multiple commands? You gotta guess?
Multiple command entries over there?
That would be awesome, wouldn't it? No, that does not work. We have to do something else instead. How do you do multiple commands normally? How about a batch file?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna write this batch file. I'm gonna take this out of here. I'm going to put it into a batch file. So I'm going to say start C:\dojo, and then I'm also going to say start appwiz.cpl, please. So it's going to open both start and appwiz.cpl. Cool. Logon command. Now here's the tricky part. I want to use dojo start.cmd. Dojo start.cmd. But I need to give it a path here to run it. So I could say C:\dojo, but in that case, I'm in episode 3, and the C:\dojo points to episode 2. So what do? I'll map another folder. I'm gonna map episode 3, and here I was thinking, oh, I need to create another folder, so we could call it tools. but I did experiment a little bit before this, and I was pleasantly surprised that this just worked. C:\Dojo tools. So now I can say here, C:\Dojo tools. What is this? This maps through my sandbox folder to here, which is actually D:\episode 3 on my local machine. See how we can layer those folders and stick them together to map my local file system into the sandbox so we can refer to it all over the place.
Okay.
All right. So the net result is that it should now have full, still only C:\Dojo, but Dojo now will have a tools folder in it, and it will have 1 point in episode 3 and 1 point in episode 2, and we'll do that. All right, let's run it again. And hopefully it will come up here, and it's going to run my batch file at the same time, which should do two things. Open appwiz.cpl and open C:\Dojo start command for us. Magic?
Yes, magic.
All right. So this is great. This gets us set up so we can tell it, hey, please open this. We can map these folders. We can set these up. And as we get a little bit farther along in the dojo, we'll probably come up with a standard folder where maybe we'll have a dojo tools folder that contains standard tools that we use as we build up to that. And we'll always map it then into somewhere into the sandbox so we can just be ready to go all the time, as well as maybe our specializations for that particular episode.
Okay.
All right, so let's do one last thing here. I can do MSI exec. This is inside the sandbox /I C:\dojo, and I need to use the episode 2. So it's episode 2.msi. That was the name of it, and I'll log I.text to C:\dojo. All right. So we will start these two things, and then an MSI will kick off and attempt to install our episode 2 MSI. This is probably something that gets very close to what we'll want to do on a regular basis. Oh, it told me I already had Sandbox running because I forgot to close the window. Actually, I'll run do that again. When I run this, I get this message box here. It says Windows Sandbox, only one instance of Windows Sandbox is allowed. All right, so you can't have multiple sandboxes running at the same time. We only have one sandbox in the dojo. Everybody must play inside there. I wish I could teach it to open up on this window. All right, or on this monitor. All right, here we go. Boom, boom, and done. Very fast, but it was supposed to install our MSI. Right? We told it to install an MSI. Where is that? And it's not showing up here. Well, notice we started the wizard before we did MSI exec. So if we hit a refresh, it shows up there. So programs and features is not fast enough to pick up the fact that we installed, or it doesn't refresh automatically. It doesn't keep scanning to notice when new things are installed. But we can open another window to C:\program files, episode 2. Ta-da! Everything is here. So cool. Now we can write a test that automatically installs every time our latest MSI. All right. Cool. Are we here?
Got it.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be an extremely useful tool, and I want to expose everybody to it so they could see it for themselves as something that they could do in here. Oh, and Bob, I just noticed in chat, mentioned that one of the things that I had to do before, every time we would want to test the episode, you remember my screen would go black and you couldn't see anything because I'd have a UAC prompt, an elevation prompt locally. I'd have to push that, and then you'd have to trust me that yes, the install was happening. Notice that we're not getting those elevation prompts inside the sandbox. That's because everything in the user that's in the sandbox is already running elevated, and they have bypassed all those prompts. That's why I can install this MSI without needing an elevation prompt. Here, I will launch the episode 2 MSI exec /I D:\dojo episode 2 episode 2.msi. And when I launch this, you're going to see that my screen will go black here. Oh, when it takes a second. It's getting ready to install it. There. Notice my screen is now black, and that's because I have a UAC prompt. And I don't think this is broadcasting, so you can't see it. So the nice thing is the Sandbox avoids that both on install and uninstall. You don't have to deal with the elevation prompt as well. Very handy, especially for us, those of us doing installations repeatedly over and over and over and over and over. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. Does that make sense? What I just talked about there?
It does.
Elevation prompts are good for users, good to protect things, but they get in the way of us, so it's nice that Sandbox just has it turned off. All right. That is the Sandbox with the configuration here. So just within, what is this, 15 lines of XML, we've got ourselves set up for more of an automated kind of system. Yeah, so Zach asked, I don't suppose there's a way to run sandboxes based off a pre-prepared image? So no, the Sandbox has its own view of windows that it provides, and that's it. Any preparation you want to do, you have to do through this login command. So you'd have to install, if you want additional software in there, you'd have to install it. For example, if we want to use WiX inside the Sandbox, if we want to like use it inside the Sandbox, we would have to get the WiX tools in there first to use them. Or we could map their folder locally. But if you want to use software that must be installed, you have to install it yourself. If you want a pre-prepared image, that's just running a virtual machine, right? Spin up a whole virtual machine and run from there. So I think that we're going to see this WSB configuration a lot more in the future and we will tailor a nice little batch file here to help us test very rapidly things inside the Sandbox. So we could just spin it up, see it work, declare victory, come back in, so we can then focus on iterating and not have to have me remember to install, uninstall, update, remove on my local machine. And you don't have to see all my, dirty desktop and things like that. You get a nice, clean Windows 11, picturesque, I don't know, whatever that is, that wave thing. There you go. All right. So David, I think that's our configuration for the day. We've got a Sandbox. We're ready to use it. We know how to use it, and we can bring it back for anything else. I think now it's time to switch over into questions, answers, and things like that. So let's go do some sparring. Here we go.
Cool.
All right, David. So now, off to sparring. What do you want to talk about? Where are we at? What's going on? Things to discuss.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. I had some experience with VMs in the past. I didn't know this Sandbox configuration existed. That's pretty neat. I'll definitely look at using that for other stuff after this too. I'm assuming it's completely self-contained. It doesn't have access to other parts of your computer whenever you're bringing up that Sandbox. Is that true? It's pretty safe in there to destroy everything inside that Sandbox?
Yep. You can't do any damage to the outside except for the map folders that you allow to pass in. And we could even mark those folders that we map in as read-only. So you could say, hey, you can read from this folder, but you can't write back to it. So if you really want to protect your outside machine, you can map some folders in, but don't allow them to be writable, and then you're safe from any changes coming back out. Okay.
And so long-term, this is for testing basically the installers that you create out of a WiX, or are you going to develop any in there at all?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting case. For us, I think the primary use case is being able to rapidly test installation packages, because one thing you want to do is when you're developing, you want to avoid installing the installation package on your target machine, because if it goes wrong, you could delete stuff off your machine. You could get stuff stuck on your machine that doesn't want to install cleanly, and you have to do really nasty things to try to get it out, and you might just have stuff left over. So by putting it in a Sandbox or a virtual machine, if you have a much more advanced configuration that you need to have like software pre-installed or things more than what the Sandbox provides, you want to do your installation in those places so that you don't mess up your dev box. I've been running a little fast and loose with Arcadas because they've been so simple. But when we start getting into the examples, David, of like removing folders,
Right.
If I got that wrong, we could see the whole Deployment Dojo gone pretty rapidly if I did something really bad. So by running in a sandbox, worst happens, the sandbox crashes, maybe, or whatever.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. On a quick, I just quickly Google searched it, right? Because I wanted to look at it after this episode. It comes up as part of Microsoft Ignite. Is that accurate, or am I in the wrong spot?
No. The Microsoft Ignite is just them advertising their future show.
Okay.
And just close the ad. Microsoft Ignite is a big show for Microsoft. It's kind of like our Deployment Dojo, but bigger.
I see it. Yeah, I got you.
It's a little bigger. And I have up here on the screen right now the kinds of things that you can configure inside the sandbox today. You can control like access to the GPU, the networking, obviously the map folders command. You can control if it has access to your microphone and your webcam. You can run it in a higher level for a protected client. You can do printer redirections. You can do the clipboard, which I talked about. You can disable that. And then you can also limit the memory in the sandbox as well, which maybe could be interesting if we want to try to run on a smaller memory, like see if it installs slower in memory. I don't. Performance testing, things like that isn't real to do in the sandbox. It's mostly just to go, look, I did this test, I did this work. Let me just try it real quick without having to go, oh, am I going to mess up my machine?
Yep. Yeah,
So-
basically what this is just a lightweight VM.
It is a very lightweight VM, so you don't have to deal with a whole nother operating system run because they're sharing the operating systems and things like that.
Sure.
Highly optimized for this lightweight situation. You can do everything else with VMs and like Christopher mentions, you could do snapshots and all that when you have full-blown VMs. Sandbox is nice and light, especially for stuff like we're doing in the Deployment Dojo. Small in the size, so we just want to kind of test and whack out.
Got it.
Excellent. Is there anything you want to go back to from before?
No, I think we covered it. You had a pretty good session last time that covered most of the initial questions on, using the WiX Toolset to just install and uninstall.
Yep. I thought repeating that would probably be a good thing.
Sure. I mean, for me.
Yeah.
But
Well, for
but I've
everyone.
done it a couple times now, and it seems to be pretty straightforward, especially when you cleared up the .NET versus the NuGet way of installing it.
Yes. Okay. Good. That's good. All right. If you don't have anything else, I have one more thing that I want to kind of mention that I thought was interesting. That I think you actually pointed this out to me later that I didn't even notice. But back in episode 2, I think in episode 1 as well. This isn't big enough, is it? Can I make? Oh, maybe. No, still not big enough. All right, we're gonna do it from the command line. Episode 2. Oh, one of the things that is, remember we created this text file just as our test data file that said this is episode 2.txt.
Right.
Episode 2.txt. This is episode 2. Woohoo! One of the things I want to point out that I thought was interesting is that episode 2.txt is 18 bytes, and then we put it into a cab to
That's right.
compress it, and it ended up being 137. So the cab ended up that much overhead. So this is actually going to turn into a note that I'm going to take to make sure that cab is correct and that we haven't messed up somewhere, because it's kind of funny that we end up going more than 100 bytes extra. We doubled it and then added 100 bytes to it when we shoved it inside a cabinet, so it didn't get smaller in that case, which I just thought was really funny.
A little bit of overhead to the cabinet, I guess.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that I'm going to take a note and go back with, because I want to point out is like that really seems off, and make sure that we don't have a bug in WiX 4 that's maybe creating cabinets in a non-optimal way, right? If we're adding overhead from WiX by saying, hey, build this cab, and not turning on all the optimizations possible. So that'll be something that I'll go look at to make sure it works out correctly. And then maybe I'll come back in another session and we'll catch up from there.
Cool.
All right. Well, we now have a sandbox that we can play with, and we'll be able to now run our katas, and I think I'll be more confident in running them. And when we get our batch file set up, it should be no more than double click or type the dojo.wsb or whatever you name your WSB file. Open up Sandbox, verify that it all worked, that our files are in the right place, that our reg keys are in their correct place. Close it and continue on with the kata. So I think that's probably where we're going to pick up next week. David, it's been wonderful having you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in 7 days. Until then, you guys keep coding. Bye.
See you.